Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take on the infiltration of China. Yeah, China's really getting in here, and they're starting to annoy me. China, get the F out. um, if you haven't resisted China, resist, because they don't have our best interest in mind. They do not. And now is the time to resist China. Not later when it's obvious and everybody's trying to resist China. Now is the time. Now is the time to resist China and boycott as many of their products and associates as you can. And I'm not talking about Chinese people, of course. I'm talking about the government of China, the country of China, the CCP. All right? Just make that clear. Also, just a quick reminder, I am demonetized. I'll be demonetized at least until March when I can reapply. Who knows if I'll get in. So please join me on two other platforms. Right now I'm also on Rumble and BitChute. Rumble, I am monetized, but I could use some more followers. And BitChute, I am not monetized because they don't monetize the same way, but they do have like a donation button if you want to send me some Bitcoin or something. Anywho, let's get into it. This warms my heart. Overruled NBA dunks on Mark Cuban, orders all teams to play the national anthem. Yeah, F you, Cuban. He thought he'd be cute and woke and stop playing the national anthem at Dallas Maverick games for some reason. I couldn't think of a dumber move other than maybe, I don't know, replacing all the players with dwarves. I mean, what is he thinking? Why would he make this move? He, in my opinion, is spending way too much time on Twitter. When people make this move, when companies make these moves, it's because their upper echelon people are using Twitter as a gauge on the American public. I'll remind you again, Mark Cuban, listen up. Less than 2% of the people in the United States use Twitter. It's not a good gauge of America. It's not really a good gauge of the world. The kind of people on Twitter are the exact kind of people who don't watch basketball. They don't watch it. People in China watch basketball. Well, a lot of them work. In fact, a lot of them are very manly. The Chinese are pushing manliness over in China while they're trying to undermine it here. So, I don't have a horse in this race in terms of the NBA. I don't watch professional sports, but if you do, I got to say, man, it's time to get out of NBA. It's time to get out of the NFL. They embarrassed themselves in the Super Bowl. Really, the last refuge would probably be hockey. Hockey is so Canadian. It's kind of not been infiltrated by the woke yet. Yet, I say. But the NBA is all kinds of woke. And Cuban, I think it's just a dumb move. I'm glad the NBA has finally drawn a line. I never thought they would overrule him. I heard this announcement earlier that Cuban made, and I thought, oh, I'm going to talk about this. And then by the time I got to it, they already overruled him. So good for the NBA. I still won't watch him, though, until they boycott China. Report. WHO beer virus investigator is recipient of Chi-Kong grant, worked with Wuhan lab for 18 years. Yeah, there's a reason it should be called the China virus. Even though President Biden doesn't seem to want to call it that and make a law saying you can't call it the China virus for some reason, even though it came from China, even though they call the Spanish flu, and call Ebola after, I believe Ebola is a river in the Congo somewhere, or Africa. Anywho, this is not surprising at all. The WHO, as I talked about in previous videos, has been completely compromised by China. They put the current head of the WHO in place, The United States fought against that. The Obama administration, I believe, were very upset, but they still didn't withdraw from the WHO. I guess they figured like, well, we won't listen to them if we don't have to. But now it's become a big deal because they're pushing these ridiculous things, and they don't even listen to the WHO anyway. WHO has said lockdowns are only for the most extreme emergencies. They're not a good policy. Democrats don't listen to them. They lock down anyway. They're still locked down. We're still locked down in New Jersey. You can go to a restaurant at 35% capacity now. It's insane. Meanwhile, Florida's open. South Dakota's open. If I could move there, I would move there in a hot minute. Can't really do that now for various reasons. But it's sad. It's very sad. And so they don't listen to the WHO. Now we're contributing again to the WHO just to do the opposite of Trump. And I don't think it has anything to do with a belief system. I think it's just the reflexive nature of the Democratic Party. They do the opposite of Trump now. They're doing everything in their power to destroy everything that Trump has ever said in his entire life. The old saying is true. If the Democrats, or if Trump came out in favor of oxygen, Democrats would hold their breath until they died. It's just insane. They should stop. There's very few Trump policies that are being followed. Yeah. CDC, double masking helps reduce exposure to the beer virus. Yeah, so does burying yourself in a block of cement, I assume, but this is, again, insane. It's insane. I'm not wearing 2 masks. I'm just not going that far. I'll put on the mask. The only reason I even wear a mask now is for other people. That's the only reason. And in New Jersey, you can't get into a store or a place of business anywhere. So I have to wear it during the day. But beyond that, I don't wear it. I mean, I carry a mask around with me. I'm taking it off all the time. And I half-ass it even when I wear it. But this is just nuts. I'm not going to wear 2 masks. I won't. I refuse to. One mask was like, okay, maybe I'll just go along with it. It is something that's good to wear around flu season. And my mask is gone come the season, man. Forget it. Speaking of China, here's a guy who slept with a Chinese spy. Eric Swalwell. And we get to hear him lecture people on Capitol Hill. Nancy Pelosi, you think Trump has no shame. Nancy Pelosi has no shame. She should not put this guy in charge of anything. He should have been immediately expelled from any committee hearing. But Nancy Pelosi just doesn't care. It doesn't matter that our own intelligence organization said he slept with a Chinese spy. I mean, that's the classic honeypot. The spy raised money for his campaign. Normally, Democrats would go, yeah, this is, they would just retire in shame, like normal people. Swalwell has no shame. He also has no defense for this. He has no defense. He just ignores it. And he is an embarrassment in general anyway. Even before this dropped, he's a total embarrassment. He's the guy who farted on camera. He ran for president. Nobody voted for him. I mean, why are the Democrats pushing this loser? Dump him. This was a perfect opportunity to get rid of a guy who can gain no traction nationally. Instead, you put him ahead of the impeachment hearing? What? You're going to turn this around for Eric Swalwell? You're going to spend your political capital digging him out of the hole, which I don't think you'll be able to dig him out of. I mean, this is a guy who's pathetic. This is a guy, I guess if you completely ignore the news cycle, even the regular news had stuff on about Eric Swalwell sleeping with a spy. It was a big story. This guy is... I can't imagine he gets reelected, but he is a Democrat in California, so he's pretty safe. But this is just the sort of harmful things that the Democrats do to shoot themselves in the foot. And again, it's about China. They infiltrated this guy. Now, they may not have current infiltration on him, but do we know that for sure? He could probably still have bugs in his office somewhere. Have they even swept his place of residence and various electronics? I'll wager no. I'll wager a big NO. And he's stupid not to have it done. He should insist upon it himself. He could still be giving info to China. Donald Trump's third impeachment lawyer, Michael Van Der Veen, called him an effing crook and sued him last year, arguing the president was trying to suppress mail-in voting. I guess this is true. This is from the Daily Mail. I hadn't heard this. But I gotta wonder why Trump got this guy on his team. This guy also donated money to prominent Pennsylvania Democrats. He sued Trump and Postmaster General Louis DeJoy over mail-in votes. Van Der Veen insists his previous cases are irrelevant to his defense of Trump. Now that would be true of a really good lawyer, so maybe he's really good. But man, it doesn't look good. I gotta say, this guy, I don't know why Trump would hire him. He's usually so gung-ho to hire loyalists. This guy doesn't seem like a loyalist. But you know, when it comes to lawyers, Trump burns through them pretty fast. So I hope this guy is at least as loyal as his pocketbook. Because the impeachment, I guess it's not going great. It's not going great for Trump. It's not going poorly, but it's not going great. And it should just be over. But doctors disappointed after Joe Biden rescinds Trump reform to boost access to opioid addiction help. Again, this is probably China. China is the reason we have the streets flooded with fentanyl. So the fact that he's doing this is, I mean, well, it makes perfect sense in that, in the realm of Democrats. They want to repeal everything Trump has done and then come out and fix the problem later. They're going to let it fester for a while and then say, oh, well, we'll fix it. And then pretend like Trump never did anything. That's not going to work this time. They think it is, but it's not going to work this time. By the time they get around to addressing this problem, which, by the way, is ironic considering the condition of his son, a drug addict, who, by the way, just got a $2 million advance on his memoirs called Beautiful Things. I'm sure that's going to be a page turner. They're just, Biden's doing everything he can to help China, from my point of view. WHO advisor. WHO's beer virus probe actually done by Chinese. Doesn't surprise me. I mean, technically it's done by Chinese minions. Claims investigation didn't examine possibility of leak from Wuhan lab. Yeah, I believe that. I believe the entire investigation was just a total farce. I mean, first off, it happened, months and months later, over a year later. I don't know what you're going to find. Second, it's taking place in China. It's controlled by the Communist Party. So what are you going to find that they haven't laid out for you to find? They control everything. And communist governments are well known for creating elaborate Potemkin villages. That's where that term comes from. They create a Potemkin village for you to visit to show that, oh, everything's going great here in Venezuela. Or, Soviet Russia or wherever. And North Korea did it too. There's I forget, I want to say it was Vice. It might not have been. But guy went to North Korea and then he snuck around a little bit past his bedtime or whatever. And he on the way to his hotel, he passed what looked like stores and people shopping and fresh produce. And then later when he went and looked at the store again, he realized the fresh produce was just a facade, like a literal facade with produce painted on it sitting in the window on the shelves of the shop, and that the entire thing was an orchestration. They don't have thriving markets in North Korea. They have an entire amusement park at the most southern end of North Korea so that people in South Korea can see the amusement park and see what kind of fun people are having. And people are having fun there because they're actually paid by the communists to go into the park and pretend to have fun. So that's how desperate communists are to convince you of their, charade. But the Chinese are way more sophisticated on that. So, you give them a few months. You wouldn't even have to give them that long. You'd give them a couple of weeks. They'll be on it. No problem with an entire excuse why everything is the way it is. But finally, I wanted to talk about this op-ed from WND and read you some excerpts. It goes, the nightmare scenario George Washington warned against. And the reason this connects to China is taking advantage of the weaknesses in the United States in order to exacerbate them. One, of course, is race. They're big on that. But mostly they are doing what a technique that the CIA used, which is to polarize two political groups as much as possible. The further you push them apart, the more you force people to take sides, the more polarizing and unstable the country becomes. And that's what they used to do in the CIA. And they'd contribute to both sides, and then whoever won, they would show up and say, well, see, we helped you topple the country so you could take it over. So right now, I believe that the Chinese government is funneling all their energy into the Democrats. Now, does that mean they're giving them direct money? Probably through proxies, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that they're using their resources to support them, especially on the internet, where they shill relentlessly. They're definitely doing it on Reddit. I've seen it, and they're doing it in other places too. And the Biden administration is helping. One of the things they're doing is I think they undid the rule for TikTok to allow people's information to be shared. Get off of TikTok if you're on it, is my advice. But let me read you this. The nightmare scenario George Washington warned against, and I talked about this before in an old video, way back when. Maybe it's just me, by Jerry Newcomb. Maybe it's just me, but I am starting to come to the conclusion that Nancy Pelosi just doesn't like former President Donald Trump. She seems to have been the driving force behind Trump impeachment, too. Jeff Charles of the Red State calls it, quote, the Democrats' new production of an impeachment story part 2. Maybe it'll work this time. Impeachment is a constitutional provision to potentially remove a sitting president. But of course, now Trump is a private citizen. Where is the Chief Justice? He is supposed to preside over a legitimate impeachment hearing, but Chief Justice John Roberts will have nothing to do with this farce. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul says the Constitution, quote, the Constitution says two things about impeachment. It is a tool to remove the office holder, and it must be presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Instead, notes Paul, this is an act by, quote, hyper-partisan Democrats, accurate, who have a, quote, deranged hatred, unquote, of the former president. He adds that they are, quote, wasting the nation's time, unquote. Did the president receive due process during the House trial against him a couple of weeks ago? No, says John Eadsmo, a constitutional attorney and prolific author. He wrote an open letter to the Senate. Quote, as an attorney and law professor who has practiced and taught constitutional law for many decades, strongly opposed the proposal to impeach and convict President Donald J. Trump and bar him from holding public office. And he goes on to quote, that Trump called for a peaceful march on the Capitol. But connecting to Washington, the father of our country, George Washington, issued some parting wisdom in his farewell address printed in newspapers beginning September 19th, 1796. The U.S. Senate Historical Office has posted the farewell address. They note, quote, he believed that the stability of the Republic was threatened by the forces of geographical sectionalism, political factionalism, and interference by foreign powers in the nation's domestic affairs. He urged Americans to subordinate sectional jealousies to common national interest. Writing at a time before political parties had become accepted as vital extra-constitutional opinion-focusing agencies, Washington feared that they carried the seeds of the nation's destruction through petty factionalism. And I think he was right. He also said, quote, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns his disposition to the purposes of his own elevation and the ruins of the public liberty. Public liberty today is at risk because of the rise of petty factionalism. That was end quote, by the way, the previous sentence. Gary Bauer points out in his recent Times, both Senator Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi are on record potentially inciting violence. It's true. They are. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team wrote a letter explaining why he was not going to appear or testify in person in this week's sham impeachment hearing. The team's February 4th letter closes. The use of our Constitution to bring a purported impeachment proceeding is much too serious to try and play these games. I think George Washington would agree. And I agree. Washington didn't like political parties, and if we could get rid of them, I would. So I do not cry for the dissolution of the GOP. And I think the dissolution of the Democrats are inevitable too. But I also think that China is pushing hard behind the scenes for the Democrats because they see the Democrats are very positively disposed to some of their tactics because they see it as a win. They've become so focused on power and nothing else. Because you got to understand that during the Bush years, the Democrats were in the weeds, man. Karl Rove was talking seriously about the Democrats becoming a marginalized party that would never be in power again. And it was looking that way. And it was scary. It was scary times. And even prior to that, Democrats did not look good. You know, prior to Bush, you had Clinton, and he was a powerhouse, but he was a lot like a Republican. And then prior to that, you had 8 years of Reagan, or you had 4 years of Bush Sr., 8 years of Reagan. You know, I mean, we go through different phases, but the Democrats this time, I think, have gone too far. And part of that is at the feet of Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi just does not seem to care. She has got it in her head she's going to win this thing at all costs. You would think someone in her 80s would be thinking about taking it easy, you know, spending time with her grandkids. Nope. She's as power hungry as ever. And quite frankly, I don't know why she didn't run for president if she's that power hungry. But maybe, you know, her current seat is she feels that, you know, she may be arrogant enough to believe she's even more powerful than that. And as far as Biden goes, I think Biden's just so corrupted. I don't think he doesn't dare go against China. I think he knows the Chinese got so much on him, he's going to keep them at bay. At the same time, I don't think he'll totally sell us out, but he'll do it enough that he'll definitely weaken us for the next guy. You know, it's the kind of thing where they're so arrogant. It's like, we could do business with China. It's no big deal. It's not going to hurt us. But yeah, the Chinese look 100 years down the road. Biden doesn't look past the next week. I mean, is he even going to be alive? I mean, the guy's in it, you know, the guy is old. The guy is old and frail and falling apart. So, it doesn't look good. So anyhow, if you can boycott anything out of China, cut it out of your life forever. try to do it, because this stuff's only going to get worse. And why would you give the Communist Party of China another $1 due? I mean, it's just bad news, right, Joan? Yeah, I'm not going to feed you Chinese dog food. We know how that all went. All right, on to the next video.